Simple Insights, your best YouTube channel.
Why are we so poor? The origins of inequality. Meet the top 10 richest people on the planet, from the owner of Louis Vuitton to the founder of Microsoft. Together, they're worth more than the entire economies of Norway and Austria combined. Meanwhile, over 700 million people on Earth are still struggling to survive below the poverty line. You'd think the world had long left slavery and feudalism behind, but inequality has only grown. 1% of humanity owns half of all global wealth. Each of them earns over $1 million a year, while half the world gets by with just a single % of the economy's output. How did we end up here? To understand that, we need to rewind about 200 years. Back then, land meant everything, and it belonged to the nobility. Most people were peasants working someone else's fields, barely scraping by. But by the 19th century, the world started to shift. Technology, trade, credit, and cities were booming. Feudalism fell apart, and the Industrial Revolution exploded. Europe's factories needed raw materials, and neighbors with fewer cannons had them. So, powered by their armies and machines, European empires began taking over lands across Asia, Africa, and the Americas, stripping them of everything valuable: gold, diamonds, coffee, tobacco. Using cheap local labor and dumping their own goods into the colonies, European nations got insanely rich. And the champion of that game? Britain, the economic superpower of the time. The real gem of the British crown was India, rich in resources, perfectly located, and packed with people. Britain squeezed it for all it was worth. Here's what happened. When the textile industry took off in the 19th century, Britain banned the export of Indian cotton to anyone but itself, buying it for next to nothing. That crushed an entire industry, from farmers to weavers, and plunged millions into poverty. Britain then sold the finished fabrics back to India at full global prices. Even decades after independence, half of India still lived below the poverty line. Now, India is slowly clawing its way out of poverty, but most African countries aren't that lucky. Take Nigeria. Lots of oil, lots of potential, and still poor. Why? Because of the so-called resource curse. A third of Nigeria's oil isn't even pumped by Nigerians, but by massive corporations like Shell and Total. Corporate profits from Africa as a whole are triple the amount of aid sent to the continent. So in reality, colonialism didn't disappear, it just changed form. Big economies moved their factories to poor countries, hired cheap labor, and kept draining cheap resources. Today, people in sub-Saharan Africa don't just live poorly, they survive on $2 a day. Okay, that's about the poorest countries, mostly ex-colonies, but what about the rest of the world? Compare Europe or the post-Soviet region to Congo or Somalia. Huge contrast, yes. But poverty exists everywhere. It just looks different. A man in Congo without a car doesn't care. Nobody drives there. But in Europe, not owning a car already counts as being poor. Look around. In most developed countries, except a few microstates like Luxembourg or Singapore, people can't buy a home without a 30-year mortgage, can't maintain 2 cars, or fly for vacation every month. The economy grows every year by a couple of %, yet your life barely moves. Why? Because that growth goes straight to the top. The rest of us spend every raise just to keep up. A new car, a better phone, a bigger rent. Then let's raise taxes, some might say. And yes, in theory, taxes could fix this. But here's what really happened. In the mid-20th century, top income tax rates reached up to 95%. Imagine earning $1 million a month and giving away $950,000. Naturally, the rich found loopholes, offshore accounts, fake companies, anything to avoid paying. Eventually, governments cut the rates to around 40%, and to make up the loss, they raised consumption taxes. And guess who pays those? The poor. Unlike billionaires, regular people can't hide income or buy paintings as investments. Their salaries get taxed automatically, and every remaining cent goes towards survival. No room for investments, just the same hamster wheel. Former colonies remain poor. Rich countries drift deeper into inequality. Can anything change? Actually, yes. In the 1990s, 38% of people lived below the poverty line. Now it's only 8%. Thanks to global growth, the internet, and better education, life did improve, but progress is slowing down. Escaping poverty is still brutally hard, especially for nations with corruption, conflicts, and no investors. Without strong leadership or unique resources, most stay stuck. When we talk about wealth, we often imagine skyscrapers, luxury cars, and endless opportunities. But statistics reveal another side of prosperity, one that deals not with how rich a country is, but how fairly that wealth is shared. Economic inequality isn't just a social issue, it's a pattern, a curve, a silent force shaping how we live, work, and even think. Let's explore how one number, the Gini coefficient, can tell stories that GDP alone never could. Understanding the Gini curve. The Gini coefficient was introduced by an Italian statistician, Corrado Gini, in 1912. His idea was simple but powerful. Use one number to describe how evenly income or wealth is distributed across a society. Imagine lining up every citizen from the poorest to the richest, then plotting the percentage of total income each group holds. In a perfectly equal world, the curve is a straight diagonal. 10% of people earn 10% of the money, 50% earn 50%, and so on. In reality, the line bends downward. The bottom half earns far less than half of the national income. The area between the ideal line and the real curve represents inequality, and that area becomes the Gini coefficient. The smaller the Gini, the more equal the society. For example, Scandinavian countries like Denmark or Norway often score around 0.25-0.30, while nations like Brazil or South Africa can exceed 0.5. High inequality doesn't always mean poverty, but it usually signals concentration of power, education, and opportunity. And here lies the irony. A growing economy can still have a rising Gini curve. More money doesn't always mean fairer distribution. Rich countries, poor people. Now let's look at a paradox that confuses economists and frustrates citizens. How can a rich country have so many people who feel poor? Take the United States. Its GDP per capita ranks among the world's leaders, yet a large portion of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. This is the concept of relative poverty, when people's living standards fall behind societal norms, even if they aren't technically poor. It's not just about having enough to survive. It's about being able to participate in society, affording healthcare, education, housing, and time for rest. When the price of these essentials rises faster than wages, middle-class families start to feel financial pressure. A person earning $60,000 in the U.S. might sound well off globally, yet with high rent, student loans, medical bills, and inflation, that income quickly melts away. Meanwhile, capital, owned assets like real estate and stocks, keeps multiplying. Those who already have access to it see their wealth accelerate at a rate far beyond average workers. That divide deepens not just economic inequality, but social tension, political division, and mental stress. relative poverty becomes an emotional phenomenon as much as an economic one. People no longer compare themselves to the past, but to those around them, their neighbors, co-workers, influencers online. The result? Frustration, even in nations that appear prosperous on paper. Even when a country beats absolute poverty, it still faces relative inequality. Look at Nigeria again, huge GDP, but wealth held by a few. Only Northern Europe managed to balance the scales, somewhat. High taxes alone won't fix inequality. Governments try, raising minimum wages, funding education, limiting monopolies, but change is slow. Why? Because the people making the laws are usually the ones who gain from keeping things the same. Be honest, would you vote to cut your own income? I'm not here to play Robin Hood or sell miracles. The truth is simple. Escaping relative poverty is up to you, no matter where you live. Learn. Educate yourself. Stay curious. That's the only real way to rise. Don't wait for luck or handouts. Nobody's coming with a suitcase of cash. Today's economy is a battle for your share of the pie, and now it's time to claim yours. If you like this video, drop a like and write in the comments, do you feel poor? Let's see how many of us there really are. Based on your feedback, I'll decide whether to continue making videos like this. Take care of yourself and your capital.